About 5 weeks ago, I finally found out why I've been screaming overnight. And normally my husband, would you please turn around, I'm feeling bad enough as it is. And normally...
Can I just stop you?
Yeah.
You just tried to control somebody.
Yeah, but
Why?
I feel really bad talking about this.
Why?
Because I'm so embarrassed at what I'm going to say.
So what you're doing is judging yourself. Can you see that?
Yeah.
You don't need to judge yourself. Someone else doesn't want you to say what you're going to say either. Yeah.
It's got to the stage where I now found out, after decades of screaming in my sleep and wondering why I still have a marriage left, and my husband, I've been praying for a long time to get to the bottom of this so I can get to the emotion of it. And now 5 weeks ago, like I said, I found out what the problem is.
Can we just turn off that mic? And can we give her the other mic? Can that mic be turned off? If you get to the bottom of it, you just need to turn it off. And we might try and use another one. Yeah. That's better?
I'm at the stage now where I don't want to go to bed or go to sleep at all. So I keep myself awake till 2:30 till I finally drop off. And I did, and this time my husband thought I'm going to let her go fully blown into the screams, because normally sometimes it's as if he's not there and he just, he just lets me go. And often he just wakes me up because he knows what's going to happen. And so he let me go, and he said he couldn't understand. I started screaming out in my own language 3 times. And then, of course, the fully blown scream came out. This is only about 4 or 5 weeks ago. Fully blown scream came out. And he said, do you know what this is about? And I had prayed that night before, but I'd prayed decades before, and I actually got angry with God over this. We had words. And finally, it was a case of, it was spirit rape, and there was 3 of them. And there was 3 of them. It was more than just rape, it was torture and rape. And I kept saying over and over, please don't do this to me, please don't do this to me, please don't do this to me, in my own language. Now, I don't use my own language at all. But like I said, now I don't want to sleep.
Yeah. When you say you don't use your own language at all?
Well, I've got no one to speak it to. Everyone they're all
I see.
dead.
What language do you speak?
Dutch.
Dutch, yeah. Okay. No worries. This issue, by the way, has been raised with me so many times with people asking me questions on the internet, and we need to address it. The truth is, yes, in your sleep state, you can be raped.
Yeah, many times. I saw them.
Yeah.
I saw them, and there's 3.
Yeah.
And I also remember being a lot younger than what I am now, and because the next day I'm thinking, why would they pick on an old hen like me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's look at what's going on, because a number of people have asked me this question. Remember, here's our father, here's our mother. Remember, their collective soul condition is what creates my condition. Does that make sense? Now, if my mother has some unhealed issues with regard to sexuality, and my father has some unhealed issues with regard to sexuality, which, let's face it, most people do. Remember, I said that energetically that leaves this person, this child, open to attack. Does that make sense? Now, it's the emotional condition of the child that creates the attraction, but that emotional condition was created by the unhealed emotion in the parents. You follow me? So, the way a parent can protect a child from this ever happening is for the mother to look at all of her issues with regard to sexuality, with regard to whatever is unhealed within her. So if she's been abused or she's been harmed by men, she would need to look at all of those issues and actually feel about all those issues and release those issues. And the man, he would have to look at, if the girl is being abused, the man would have to look at what attitude he has towards women, what does he feel about sexuality with women, and he'd have to heal those emotions. What does he believe about women in terms of about them as sex objects, for example? He would have to work his way through those emotions. That would then create a barrier around the child where the child can't be harmed sexually. Right? Now, unfortunately for yourself, your parents did not do that.
No.
Right? And so what's happened is that for yourself, inside of yourself, there are some unhealed emotions which create holes in that protective armour, right, that allow spirits to be able to influence you sexually, which feels like a rape to you.
I know what rape is like, and my mother said when I was raped that I would have to marry the man if I was pregnant.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So there are a lot of unhealed emotions about the rape and about the childhood sexual abuse. My suggestion for you is that when you start allowing yourself to work your way through those emotions, that's when you can receive protection from your spirit friends. Right? See, while we deny these emotions exist within us, then our spirit friends who can assist us would have to break one of God's laws to assist us. See, if I'm trying to stay away from an emotion inside of myself and I don't want to heal it, the spirits are going to be working against that. I mean, good spirits are going to be working against that in order to protect us. Mm-hmm. So they're working against our own desire. Our desire is to not heal something, right, because we want to stay away from it, we're afraid of it. So we don't want to heal it because we're afraid of it. Mm-hmm. So see, many of us feel we think we want to heal something. But the truth is, inside of us, is we're so afraid of the issue that we don't actually want to heal it. What we want is somebody to come along and rub it all out for us. Does that make sense? Most of the time that's what we want. We want God in particular, and a lot of us give up on God because God doesn't rub it out for us. So we get totally angry with God and upset with God, and we say, oh, God's useless, God doesn't want to help me, God doesn't love me. And then we start wanting other people to rub it out for us, and of course they can't because the emotion is inside of us anyway. So at some point we need to have some kind of willingness to deal with the emotion. Now, this is a second point that I want to raise about protection. You can only be protected by spirit friends or by God when you're in an unhealed state, I'm talking about here. So remember, when you're in a healed state, when you're in a oneness state, you are automatically protected. Does that make sense? But when you're in an unhealed state, when you're in a state where you've still got emotions to work on inside of yourself, you can only be protected by God or by spirits who are on the divine love path if you demonstrate a willingness to deal with the core emotion.
Which is?
The issues regarding sexuality and being raped for yourself.
Well, for starters, yeah.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So when you actually get into a state yourself where you're willing to go into those emotions, now your spirit friends can protect you awake or asleep. They can protect you. But when you have an unwillingness to deal with the emotion because of your fear about those emotions and how terrible they feel, then they can't help you in that state, and you're at the mercy of anyone who is attracted to you through the law of attraction. Can everyone understand that? It's the willingness. So this is second point number 2 about protection. When you demonstrate a true willingness to actually feel the causal emotion, that is the time that you can have the maximum amount of protection from spirits and God. When you don't have a willingness to deal with the causal core emotion, and I mean an emotional willingness, a soul willingness, it's not just an intellectual, oh yeah, I want to do it. It's a really strong, passionate desire to deal with the emotion. When you have that, you can be protected. If you don't have that, they would have to break God's other laws in order to protect you. Because the law of free will is paramount. So the law of free will, and this is something to understand, the law of free will is so paramount that God will not break it. God will never do anything unless you really badly want it to happen. God will not do it. The law of free will is paramount to God. In other words, it is one of the basics of the laws of love. So, if I inside of me have an unwillingness to emotionally get at the core emotion with regard to an issue, God cannot help me in that state. Nor can my spirit friends who are on the divine love path help me in that state. Because to do that, they would have to break their own relationship with God. Right? So they can't help me in that state either. The only spirits that will be willing to help me in that state will be natural love spirits, and even them, they won't be able to overcome my law of attraction. So I will get very little help in that state. As soon as I demonstrate a pure willingness inside of myself, from my soul, to deal with the hard emotional issues that are there, without judgment, they're just there, once I am willing to deal with them, from that moment on, I can be afforded the maximum amount of protection that is available to me. Does everyone get that? So, this is particularly hard and harsh, it feels like, with sexual issues. The reason why it feels particularly hard and harsh is because many times we have sexual issues occur during our childhood or during our young adulthood with regard to being harmed, raped or hurt, abused in some way. And because of those issues, our environment generally shuts us down, doesn't allow us to process any of those emotions. And so we learn in ourselves to carry this personal shame the rest of our lives. And the unfortunate fact is that while I'm carrying the personal shame and unwilling to feel it and process it through emotionally, I'm also now in a state where I can't be protected externally by God or by spirits who could protect us. Does that make sense?
I sort of don't feel as if I'm unwilling, because that's what I had words with God over. What more do you want me to do? You know, how more genuine can I get?
Let me demonstrate that you are in fact unwilling.
Am I really?
If you're angry with God,
I was, yeah.
you're unwilling.
Yeah.
Remember, anger covers over what? Fear or terror, let's say, in your case, right? Anger covers over the terror, and what does the terror cover over? The grief. Now, if I'm angry towards... Whoops, I spelled it wrong again. If I'm angry towards God, am I in a state of willingness to feel the emotion?
I'd apologise next day.
That's okay. Apology or not, you're still angry with God about it.
Yeah,
right now, I'm saying.
Yes, I am.
Yes.
I am, because the wheels have fallen off.
Exactly.
And I feel as if I'm skating on very, very thin ice.
Yes.
Very thin ice.
Which is all these terror emotions.
Hanging in there by my teeth.
Yep.
Just hanging in by my teeth. Yeah.
The truth is you are very angry with God. And while you hold on to that anger with God, you are totally unwilling to deal with the underlying emotion. And while we're unwilling to deal with the underlying emotion, we can't be afforded the help that could be given. You see, this is something many of us need to understand, is that it's not intellectually here manufacturing anger or no anger. If the feeling inside of me is I'm angry towards God, remember, we get angry towards somebody, whether it's God or not, we get angry towards somebody because we want them to do something for us. Now, the truth is, if God already isn't doing it, there's a loving reason why. And the loving reason why God isn't already doing it for you is because He respects your free will and you are unwilling to feel the underlying terror and grief associated with the events of the past. That's why. Now, when you are willing to deal with those, you won't feel angry with God anymore. You will actually feel like you want to deal with those things without feeling anger towards God. Right? And when you get into that space, of course, it's easy for God to help you in that space. Now, this is where we need to be really honest with ourselves. Can you see? Like, we can say to ourselves, oh, I want to do it, I want to do it, I want to do it. But in reality, the truth is oftentimes the feeling coming from us is totally the opposite to that. I had a conversation earlier today where that's the case with yourself, Raya. Like the unwillingness to feel to see you wanted to be angry, for example, right? You want to be angry, and there's a reason why, but the anger is telling you that you're unwilling. Does that make sense? And if I'm in a state of the anger is telling me I'm unwilling. I need to look at why am I so unwilling? Why am I so unwilling? Because until I fix the willingness, how can anyone who's on the divine love path in the spirit world help me? Because to help me, they would have to break the law of my will, which is paramount to them. You see?
I've actually come to that conclusion because I thought, well, maybe if I am in the mind and I can reason this through, and I've actually had big conversations with the soul. We really, obviously there's a block that you not want to go there. And it's almost as if we're two people and I'm arguing with my own soul. We really need to do this. We really need to get through this.
You are not actually arguing with your own soul in that space.
Who am I arguing with?
You're arguing with another spirit who doesn't want to deal with her abuse.
For God's sake, no more.
You see, what happens if I'm in a state here emotionally where I don't want to deal with my sexual abuse, what kind of spirits am I going to attract? I'm going to attract some other women spirits who also don't want to deal with their abuse emotionally. Can you see that? So I might have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 of them surrounding me at any one point in time. So AJ comes along, the idiot AJ comes along and suggests you've got to feel through the terror and into the grief of the abuse. These girls are going to be saying, no, we don't want you to do that. We don't want you to do that.
Is my mother one of them?
Well, of course your mother would be one of them if she's passed.
Yes.
Because who do you think was there when your abuse was?
Well, she was going to deal with it herself. Like, she married a pedophile also. And she was going to deal with it.
And can you see, then it feels like we're having a conversation with ourselves, when in reality we're not having a conversation with ourselves at all. We're having a conversation with a spirit who does not want you to go into this emotional work of dealing with your abuse. Because if you do, they might have to, or they won't have the connection with you anymore. And they disagree totally with me, by the way. Every abused woman in the spirit world who has yet to deal with their abuse disagrees wholeheartedly with everything I'm saying to you about abuse. Right now. Every one of them. Every one of them thinks I'm an idiot. Everyone thinks I'm a male who doesn't know what to do, doesn't know the truth. Every single one of them. And if you've got 1 or 2 of them around you because of it from your own childhood, they are going to be telling you exactly the opposite thing that I'm telling you right at this moment. Right? Of course they are going to be telling you because they never dealt with their abuse their entire life. They don't even want to take responsibility for the fact that your abuse probably occurred because of the unhealed stuff that they dealt with from their abuse. They don't even want to deal with that, let alone deal with the abuse itself. Right? But the truth is that while I have this feeling inside of me where I'm exercising my will into an unwilling state, from that moment on, I am now cannot be protected by any bright spirits on the divine love path or by God, and my law of attraction is going to dominate my experience because of that. And it's going to dominate my experience so much that eventually I'll get into one of these emotions, eventually, as a result of that experience. But while I stay in the anger is a demonstration of my unwillingness. So remember, every time you're angry, it's a demonstration of your own unwillingness to deal with a deeper emotion. Right?
So how can I get it to back off? Because I have talked to her.
Yep. So
in the past.
You can't deal with her because she is there because of your unwillingness. You need to look at what your hook is into her. Now, if it's your mother, the hooks are going to be quite obvious. Can you see, like, it'd be I want to please my mother, I want to get my bond with my mother close, we're girls and we should stick together, all the women in the planet should stick together against the men. There's a lot of those kind of emotions there if a person's been abused.
No, we're totally different. She was pitiful, really.
Right?
Very weak.
But the truth is that I'm in a state of anger. I know I'm in unwillingness. The next question is, do I want to become willing?
I thought I was.
Do I want to become willing? Most of the time we don't.
Yeah,
for very strong reasons.
Well, I had a very strong reason. I was going to be due to the post, to be quite honest. That was my aim, to get to it one month. So I worked really, really hard, and then the wheels fell off. And I thought I won't say anything to anyone, it'll show.
Far better to be truthful though, right? So, do I want to become willing about the issue of my abuse? Now, I understand, like, when I returned to Earth, I took most of Mary's childhood abuse issues with me. So in this life, it took me 7 years to work through the issues of childhood sexual abuse from my first century existence. Right? It can be done, but it requires you getting out of anger and getting into the terror and then underneath that. That's what it requires. When you're willing to do that, God can help you through the entire process. So while at the moment it might sound to you that I'm being quite callous to a person who's been abused, the truth is I've had exactly the same personal experience of having to deal with those emotions, right? And they don't affect me anymore. But they used to affect me terribly as a result of the unhealed emotion. I was terrified of dealing with the emotions. And for me, the emotions were pretty intense, working my way through all of them, as they will be for any person who has had abuse in their childhood or in their young adult life. Right? But all you need is willingness, like a real soul willingness to deal with them. Remember, the anger is telling you when you're not willing. Right? And in a state of anger, you cannot be protected.